Brownsville, Texas, where the Rio Grande meets the Gulf of Mexico and where the past refuses to stay buried. Built in 1846 as the first major U.S. military post along the Rio Grande, Fort Brown has witnessed war, disease, death, and tragedy for over 175 years. Today, it houses a university campus where students study among the ghosts of cavalrymen, plague victims, and the restless dead. This is the story of one of Texas' most haunted locations, where history and horror walk hand in hand. Fort Brown wasn't just built to defend the border, it was built on bloodshed. Originally called Fort Texas, it was renamed after Major Jacob Brown, one of the first casualties of the Mexican American War, who died defending the very ground where students now attend classes. But Major Brown was just the beginning. For over a century, Fort Brown served as a military hospital, a burial ground, and a witness to some of the darkest chapters in American frontier history. The fort housed the U.S. Cavalry's largest military hospital, treating wounded soldiers from multiple wars. During the yellow fever epidemics of the 1880s, thousands of bodies were buried directly beneath what is now the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley campus, Brownsville. Multiple bodies were often thrown into single graves. The dead were buried quickly with little ceremony, often without proper identification, and when the Army abandoned Fort Brown in 1909, they attempted to relocate 3,800 bodies to Alexandria National Cemetery in Louisiana. Attempted being the key word, because not all of the dead were found, and not all the dead wanted to leave. Students and faculty at UTRGV have reported encounters with uniformed figures walking the campus at night, men in military dress from an era long past. These aren't reenactors or Halloween pranks. These are full apparitions, complete with period uniforms and cavalry gear. The cavalrymen appear most often near the old fort buildings, walking patrols they began over a century ago. They move with purpose, following routes that correspond to the original fort layout, ignoring the modern buildings that have sprung up around them. Whew. But these ghostly soldiers aren't passive remnants. They interact with the living. Security guards have reported being approached by uniformed figures who asked about the status of the fort, speaking in outdated military terminology. When guards try to respond to figures, simply fade away, leaving behind only the sound of spurs clicking on concrete and the lingering scent of old leather and gunpowder. Now, among the many spirits that haunt Fort Brown, none is more mysterious or more unsettling than the woman in Victorian clothing who roams the campus after dark. She appears most often in the university library, gliding between the stacks in an elaborate Victorian gown that rustles with each step. Students working late have reported seeing her from the corner of their eyes, an elegant figure in period dress browsing books that haven't been relevant for over a century, but when they turn to look directly at her, she's gone. Only the sound of rustling fabric and a faint scent of old perfume remain. Library staff have found books relocated overnight. Victorian-era texts moved to prominent positions on shelves, and if someone wanted them to be found, they could find it there. The library experiences what staff diplomatically call unusual activity. Books fly off shelves without explanation. Just think about Ghostbusters, that famous scene in the library. They're not falling, they're flying, as if hurled by invisible hands. The phenomenon is most common during evening hours when the Victorian woman has been sighted. Security cameras have captured books moving on their own, but they never show who or what is moving them. Staff have learned to expect cleanup duty after particularly active nights when entire sections are found reorganized according to patterns no living person would understand. So, who was she in life? Historical records from Fort Brown's early days mention several prominent women associated with the fort. officer wives, nurses, and civilian contractors. But yellow fever claimed many lives during 1885 between 86, the epidemic, and record keeping was poor during crisis periods. She could be one of hundreds of unnamed victims buried beneath the campus, or she could be someone whose death was so traumatic that her spirit couldn't move. What's certain is that she's protective of the library, territorial about certain areas of campus, and very much aware of the living. Now, unlike the cavalrymen who appear primarily to security staff, the Victorian woman chooses her encounters carefully. She appears most often to students who are alone, working late, or just conducting research into the fort's history. One graduate student researching yellow fever victims reported being approached by the woman who pointed to specific documents before vanishing. Those documents contain names of plague victims, women who had died in the fort's hospital over a century ago. What makes Fort Brown unique among haunted locations is that it's not abandoned. Thousands of students attend classes where cavalry officers once drilled. They eat lunch where plague victims once died. They sleep in dormitories built over unmarked graves. The result is a constant interaction between the living and the dead, it seems, are very much aware of their new neighbors. Students in the residence halls report electrical disturbances that follow patterns. Lights and televisions turn on by themselves, always at the same times each night, as if following a schedule from a bygone era. Water faucets activate without human intervention, running at full force until someone physically turns them off. But the water that flows is always ice cold, regardless of the season or position of the hot water handle. And believe me, it's always hot in South Texas, because this is where I am from. So, yeah, that's creepy. Now we have to go into the morgue chapel and the old guardhouse. These are three buildings at Fort Brown, and they are considered so actively haunted that even university maintenance crews prefer to work in teams, never alone. During the fort's active period, the morgue processed hundreds of bodies. Soldiers killed in combat, civilians who died of disease, and victims of the various epidemics that swept through the border region. Current occupants of the building report a persistent smell of formaldehyde and old flowers. Even though the space has been thoroughly renovated, cold spots appear randomly throughout the building, sometimes lasting for hours. Temperature readings show drops of 20 to 30 degrees in specific areas with no explanation. Most disturbing are the sounds. Metallic clanking that matches the rhythm of old embalming equipment, and the squeak of wheels that could be gurneys being moved through the halls that now serve as classrooms. Now, the fort's chapel served multiple denominations and hosted countless funeral services during its military years. Today, the building's experiences what can only be described as phantom services. The sound of hymns sung by invisible congregations, the creak of pews filled with no one visible. Motion sensors trigger without apparent cause, and several times security has responded to reports of lights and organ music, only to find the building empty and secure. Staff have found the chapel arranged for services that were never scheduled. Hymnals open to funeral dirges, candles lit with no one having access to the building. It's creepy. Now, the third building, the military guardhouse, where soldiers were confined for disciplinary infractions, now serves administrative functions. The building remembers its original purpose. Staff report the sound of pacing, heavy boots walking back and forth in empty rooms above their offices. Doors slam shut on their own, and the old cell areas experience sudden temperature drops accompanied by the sound of chains rattling. Most unsettling are the voices, angry shouting, pleading, and what sounds like roll call being conducted in empty rooms at all hours of the day and night. The investigation will always continue into this. Dr. Tony Knopp, professor emeritus at UTRGV, leads the Shades of Haunted History walking tours through downtown Brownsville and the Fort Brown campus. His tours document ongoing encounters and collect new witness testimonies. What emerges from these investigations is a pattern of activity that suggests Fort Brown isn't just haunted. It's actively occupied by spirits who consider the university an intrusion of their eternal duty. The fort's paranormal activity has been documented in not one but 2 volumes of The Ghosts of Fort Brown published by the university. The second volume was released specifically because new encounters continue to occur regularly. This isn't a historical curiosity. This is an ongoing phenomenon with new witnesses every semester, and every investigation reveals that whatever haunts Fort Brown has no intention of leaving. Today, UTRGV's Brownsville campus has been officially named one of the most haunted college campuses in Texas. Students arrive each semester knowing they're sharing their dormitories with the dead. But rather than abandon the location, the university has embraced its haunted history. Ghost tours are conducted regularly. The paranormal activity is documented and studied, and the spirits seem to have accepted their role as part of campus life. Because at Fort Brown, the past isn't past. It's present in every shadow, every unexplained sound, every book that moves on its own in the library. The cavalrymen still patrol their posts, the Victorian woman still tends to her library, and somewhere beneath the modern campus, thousands of forgotten dead rest uneasily in their unmarked graves. Fort Brown stands as proof that some places are too steeped in history to ever truly be at peace, where the living and the dead coexist in an uneasy truce that has lasted for over a century. And it shows no signs of ending anytime soon. So, thanks for spending some time with me today. If stories like this make you reconsider attending college at a location with more dead residents than living ones, then you're in the right place. Subscribe for more stories that blur the line between education and exorcism. And if you ever find yourself walking alone across a Texas University campus at night, remember that not all of your fellow students are still among the living, and some of them have been attending classes for over 150 years. I'm Jorge, and this is Jorge's House of Horrors.